I'd like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm speaking to you from today, and acknowledge traditional custodians across the lands we are all from. I'd like to pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Hi everyone, welcome to this year's Perinatal Mental Health Speaker Series. Before we get started, just a note on content. As we're talking about pregnancy, parenting, and mental health, some of the topics we talk about may be distressing. If you feel concerned, distressed by any of this content, please contact one of the numbers or services that are listed in the video description. We know that up to 1 in 5 birth parents and 1 in 10 non-birth parents and caregivers experience symptoms of perinatal mental health issues. One of the biggest challenges is lack of information. Not knowing what to look out for, as well as the continued stigma around mental health, particularly for new and expectant parents and caregivers, means it's difficult to know how to seek help. This week, we'll be speaking to people about their own experiences of perinatal mental health and help dispel some of the stigma and understand more about this common but often overlooked issue. Today, I'm really honoured to be speaking to Jones. Jones is a non-binary queer person living and playing on Gadigal land. They have 2 grown kids, 3 elderly cats, a teeny dog, a wonderful partner, and a twin brother. They work in the not-for-profit space with Vegan New South Wales as their market program manager, and they developed and continue to lead the successful Sydney vegan market. They are passionate about social justice and encouraging, equipping, and inspiring others to believe in a better tomorrow. Hi, Jones. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your story with us.
Hi, Asha. My absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
To get us started, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your parenting story?
Yes, absolutely. So I have 2 wonderful kids. And I had my first child when I was 17 and my second child when I was 23. Feels like an absolute lifetime ago. So there's 5.5 years difference between them. Their names are Alex and Grace. And, you know, it's been an interesting journey. One of the things that I've heard most in my life is you're too young to have kids. Well, that's what it was. Now it's sort of shifted to you're too young to have kids that age, which, you know, I understand that. Certainly it's felt quite invalidating over the years, but I also understand. I mean, they're right. But, you know, here we are. And, you know, obviously there's pros and cons with having children at any age, but certainly, you know, as we've all gotten older, it is really beautiful. It really is a really beautiful time now. I mean, I want to say it's always been beautiful, but, you know, parenting is often not beautiful. But, you know, now, you know, they're 24 and 19 and we've got really beautiful relationships and I feel like I can relate to them and yeah.
So you were 17 when you had your first kid, Alex. What was your experience with being a young parent? What was that like?
You know, I think back to who I was then and where I was at, and I certainly can connect with the knowledge that I was, you know, a teenager, and teenagers often feel like they can do everything. And I definitely felt like that. You know, I don't think that I fully connected in with the extent of what it would actually be like to have a child. You know, I was 7 months pregnant when I did my HSC, and you know, obviously that's an interesting vibe to say the least. But you know, one thing that, you know, I can definitely remember from that time was how isolated I felt. I didn't know anyone, like obviously none of my friends had babies. They were too busy being young people. And so I was essentially living a very grown-up life, but as a child myself, and experiencing, a lot of mental health issues, feeling just, as a baseline, very depressed, and very alone in it. My partner at the time, who is the father of both of my kids, he was 20 when Alex was born, and also had a range of mental health stuff going on for him that he certainly did not acknowledge. So it was really, a very unhealthy pairing. Took me some time to realize that, but it wasn't a great time. And that, certainly added to my experience. But just feeling very alone. And like, I remember when Alex was born, when she was born, I just remember like having this like gorgeous little baby and just looking at her and just crying like nonstop, like in the hospital, and not really knowing why that was happening. And no one really, I was at that point, I was still under my parents' private health insurance. So I went to a private hospital and had my own room. And that really further added to my isolation, because I just felt like I was alone in this room. I'd had a cesarean as well. So I was like in this recovery for my body and just being very much alone. Yeah.
And then Grace came along when you were 23. How were things different, 23 versus 17?
It was only 5 years, 5.5 years, but it made such a difference. At that point, we'd moved to Glebe. So we were, around here. And I was, far more, I had built a life, like an adult life and an independent life for the most part. I mean, we were broke for sure. But, I was walking Alex to and from school every day, and was part of community. And at that point, my ex-husband and my relationship was, healthier than it had been, and so it just felt very different. I felt far more equipped and supported to have another child, and it was just much different. I think when I was 17, obviously I just had no idea what I was doing, and I really also understand that is a very common experience for parents at any age that they have babies. So I know that that's not only isolated to us very young ones, but certainly as I was a little bit older, it did feel easier. I felt more equipped to do the things that I wanted to do and needed to do for this little baby and this 5-year-old. Yeah.
And you spoke about that feeling of isolation and the sadness, and I know that experience of looking at your baby and just crying, and feeling that big emotion, but also the sort of social idea that it's the wrong emotion. Can you tell us a bit more about that experience of perinatal mental health?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard because I didn't get any support. I didn't know what to do. I don't think that I really connected in with the importance of it, or the degree in which I was suffering. I thought that it was that was just a normal parenting thing, but actually I needed to not think about myself and think about Alex and put the focus on her and really not think about me, while I kind of, gradually unraveled. But there was just a lot of tears, a lot of isolation, because we'd also moved. We were living with my parents for a short while, and then we moved out to Penrith. And so geographically, I was also very isolated, wasn't anywhere near my family, and, was with, my ex-husband was, I want to say this, gently, but he was, not a nice person to me, and that started when Alex was about 1. And so we'd moved out west. He was being quite violent, but also I was at that age. I look back now and I'm like, wow, Jones, like, I just want to hug my past self and really just like show them so much empathy, but also strength that, you can, there are ways out of this. But I really just had no idea. I just didn't know. And so, yeah, it was just one of the things that was very helpful, though, was I joined a community play group for new parents with, I think it was called Baby Group, actually. And I mean, I think I was about 20 years younger than all of the other parents that were there, but we all had kids the same age, and they were all tiny babies. And so we met once a week, and that was, those times were wonderful. I felt like there was solidarity, and I wasn't alone in it. So that's something that I, absolutely recommend to every new parent, to connect in with other parents that are having the exact same experience as you are, for that support, and also, accessing services. But yeah, it was just, I just remember I didn't even know what to do. I didn't know.
Yeah, I think that isolation experience is something that there's not a lot of knowledge about, but also the way that, lack of easy to access information about the experiences, the internal experiences of new parenting can exacerbate the feeling of isolation.
Absolutely. And I think, I've done some research since then, and, I read that it's quite common for people who have babies very, very young to set a very high standard around how they are, how they exist in parenting, and obviously I think quite untenable expectations. And so, I just remember feeling like I needed to be, already had all these barriers of, I'm broke, I'm so young, I'm with this person who is, with this tiny baby, and it makes me feel overwhelmed even just talking about it now. I have literally forgotten my train of thought.
That's okay.
What was I even saying?
So the question was about the isolation and lack of information contributing to isolation.
Okay. No, it's totally gone. God knows what I was saying. So sorry.
No, don't apologize. I think all trains of thought are valid, and where they finish is valid as well.
Oh, yes. Actually, now I remember what I was saying. Yes, that's right. Just feeling like I really needed to be perfect, and that because I was feeling these, I was having this my internal life was quite bleak, but feeling like that was not allowed, like that can't happen. I need to just press on, and if I reach for support, then I'm a failure, and all this unhelpful thinking that just further isolated me. And yeah, the things that I would do differently.
And at the time, did you know much about perinatal mental health, or specific things like perinatal depression or anxiety?
Not really. I knew a little bit. I think I knew it existed, but it was not something that I had, which is, incorrect. But it was, it was there, but it wasn't me.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because we know that it is common, up to 1 in 5 birth parents, but that experience of not associating it with yourself, I think it's attached to stigma around mental health to a certain degree, but also, again, lack of easily accessible information, and hearing stories like yours that people can see themselves in.
Oh, absolutely. I think, back then, because, we're talking almost 25 years ago, I certainly did not see myself in anything. All of the parents were older and, happy and managing and capable. And yeah, that was not my experience at all.
You mentioned finding the connections and support through the baby group. What other sort of supports were useful for you, especially at that early time?
What was really helpful was practical support, to be honest. So, I lived quite far away, but when my mum was able to come out, or if a friend was able to come out, them, doing the dishes or folding up my washing, or letting me, taking the baby and allowing me to just have a little rest. That stuff was wonderful. Or even just hanging out, like normalizing, I was like so young, 18, 19, and my baby is now 19, and I can see how she lives her life and goes out and has a great time. Well, now that, she turned 18 in the age of COVID. And so her experience of being an adult has been delayed because of COVID. So now she's trying to make up for lost time. And, the way that I experience her is just, hanging out with friends and chilling out and just having that sort of beautiful free spirit. And so when I was able to do that, when I was that age, whilst also having a child, those moments were really beautiful, where I wasn't, having this, 30-year-old person experience, but being 18, but actually, having those 18, 19-year-old experiences, that was very helpful. I felt like I wasn't like an alien living this weird, different life that no one else is living. And yeah. So that practical stuff was great. Yeah,
most definitely. And I love that point you made about giving you the space to be a kid.
Yeah.
And you recently came out as non-binary. How did your kids respond to that?
Oh, I'm going to try not to cry. So beautifully. I came out to them separately, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous about it. Far more nervous than I was when I came out as queer to them. I came out as queer and they were like, yep, cool, sure. Okay, now you've caught up, we know. But when I came out as non-binary, I told Alex first, and we were walking along Coogee coastline, and we were walking up a hill, and I was like, okay, you could do this. And I said to her, I've had a bunch of realizations, and I have realized that I'm non-binary, and I'm using they them pronouns. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. Okay. And I started crying, and I was like, oh wow, really? And she was like, Mum, how do you think you've raised us? and that was just so special. And Grace had a really similar response. And then a few weeks later, she said to me, "Oh, I wanted to ask you, does mum still feel okay? Or would you like us to call you would you like us to call you something else?" I was like, "Mum's still great. And thank you so much for asking." Just being seen by them. Wow, it is profound, to be honest, like really being seen and respected by my children feels very important. And I feel very lucky, to be honest, like so lucky.
I think that's also a credit to you for raising kids who can not just accept you, but who are thoughtful enough to ask those sort of questions and do those kinds of check-ins. It sounds like they've got pretty good emotional intelligence themselves.
Yeah, and they've also been raised around lots of queers, lots of trans folk and lots of queers, and that really has created this sort of, from what I can witness of them and what I notice of them, this sort of baseline, beautiful, like empathy, but also acceptance, and but fierce acceptance, and they are both fierce allies, and oh God, I just feel so proud. Like, Alex, she's just moved to a new job, but in her previous job, she advocated for, and it was a big organization, she advocated for pronouns and for traditional country to be like mandated on everyone's signature. And they did that. Like, she pushed for that, and now everyone does that. And like, watch me over here not coping at all, but that's happening. Yeah, so good.
Obviously you spoke about some of those really difficult things about being a young parent and those experiences, but I'd love to hear as well what some of the best parts of being a young parent are.
So many things, Alex and I are only 17 years apart, and I've got friends who are older than that. Like, our age difference is older than that. And so it's been a really beautiful thing to experience our relationships, the relationships that I have with both of them sort of evolve as we've all grown up together. And, yes, it was very challenging, and it was also very challenging to, be recovering from trauma with them. But, also being very young together, and going on adventures, and having energy to do that, and making mistakes, but talking about that, and really it really has, we've really grown up together, and that's been so lovely. And yeah, I think particularly now, I think always, but now that we're all adults, and we can go and do fun stuff together. Like, my eldest daughter Alex is a DJ, and so I like, obviously in a pre or post COVID world, so I like to go and go to her gigs, and be the one that's first on the dance floor. I don't think that they get too embarrassed about me, but oh well, if they do, that's fine. They know me well enough to know that is going to happen. And just, being able to relate to their friends, and being the cool mum, like, I love that. Like, I would take that anytime. That's very validating for me. Yeah, so I think that, obviously there's pros and cons with having babies at any age, but yes, it's very hard to have a child when you're also a child, and financially how rough that is, and emotionally and mentally how rough that is when you're still trying to carve out who you are as a person and as an adult. But but also having that beautiful connection, and being quite similar in age, so I can understand, you know, really, it wasn't that long ago for me that I was also having these feelings and experiences that they're having. Yeah, I mean, it's so gorgeous. Like, I really love it. And also, you know, something that is also really important is that, you know, I'm now an empty nester for the most part. Like, and I'm having an experience now as an adult that I've not had before. Sorry, Siri has just come up. Okay. So I'm having an adult experience without children for the first time in my life. And, you know, that's interesting. That's, you know, I feel like that's probably going to take me some time to navigate. And because, you know, for the first time in my adult life, I actually don't have the responsibilities of small children. You know, I mean, with kids of any age, they like to change the goalposts at any moment. And so they're still very reliant on me, which I love. And will, you know, I want us to stick together as for in any capacity for as long as we can, you know. But it's different, like it is very different. And so now it's like my work is being like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, what? I've got all this time. I mean, my issue is that historically I've put that into my work. But, you know, one of the things that COVID has taught me is that it's actually really important to have a work-life balance and not spend every moment of every day working, because that's really boring and there are other things to do. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. That's, you know, I'm 42. And so that's like, you know, that similar vibe of you're too young to be an empty nester. Yeah, I am. Most people that are empty nesters are like so much older than me. And oh, what do they do? Like, should I buy a van and just travel around Australia? Is that what we do? I'm keen on that.
That actually sounds lovely. Yes.
That doesn't it? Yeah. You want to come? Yeah.
Well, Jones, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been so wonderful to chat with you and to hear about your experiences and your wonderful kids. So thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I feel very honoured.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. You can find more information about perinatal mental health. You can order resources and find contact information through our website, pnda.wayahead.org.au. Have a great day.